Southland, 1 week at a time. SCV chat starts now.
It's Monday o'clock It's 7 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, so you know what time it is. It is time for your weekly episode of SCV Chat. And before we get started, please remember, the views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GEC, nor any divisions, brigade, camps, or any other subsidiaries. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? We have a great episode for you tonight, and it's just going to be a good, calm, laid-back historical discussion with the Dr. Sandy Mitcham Jr. And I'm so happy to have him on. For those who do not know, or who are newcomers to SCV Chat, Dr. Mitcham has been on the show a couple times, and every time it's a blast. You're going to learn a lot tonight. And so without further ado, real quick, make sure to share this episode out. Let's get some good numbers for tonight. Without further ado, Dr. Mitcham, take it away.
Well, I thought we'd talk about some Louisiana generals. This show had its genesis Thursday night on the program. Moose wouldn't let me recuse myself from the quiz, so I answered most of the questions Zebulon York. And we decided to talk about him and some of the other Louisiana Confederate generals. You write a book. I've written a few. Every book seems to have somebody that pops up that you admire that you weren't really expecting to. My book's on the Desert Fox, Field Marshal Irvin Rommel. I came to decide the best tank commander in World War II was a guy named Walter Naring. Commanded the Africa Corps, and he commanded Panzer Corps and a Panzer Army on the Eastern Front. And there was simply none better, in my view. When I did Bust Hell Wide Open, my biography of Nathan Bedford Forrest, I came out with a tremendous admiration for his wife, Mary Ann Forrest. I did a book, I guess I can show it to you, the Encyclopedia of Confederate Generals, which is rather huge. And one of the generals I came to admire a great deal, I'd never really paid any attention to, his name is Zebulon York. He was from, strangely enough, Avon, Maine. You could almost see the Canadian border from his house. It was up in the northwest corner of Maine. And he came from a military family. His grandfather was an aide to George Washington at Yorktown, was there when the British surrendered. But York had no military background. He went to Transylvania University in Kentucky, where Jefferson Davis went, but many years later. I liked it. Somehow ended up in Vidalia, Louisiana. He read law. He attended the University of Louisiana, which is now Tulane, and fell in love with the South. And then he bought a plantation. And then he bought another one. And he bought another one. He ended up with 6 plantations. He and Eliza Hoover, his business partner, ended up owning almost 1,100 slaves. York became very successful in business. He paid more realty taxes in 1860 than anybody else in Louisiana. And of course, in that year, Louisiana was number 2 in the nation in per capita income. The South was quite wealthy. Mississippi, number 1. But he adopted the Southern way of life. He was very good to his slaves. I don't know who wrote his obituary. They didn't give the man a byline, but I wish they had, because it should be required reading for every journalism student in America. This is how you do an obituary. And the journalists went and interviewed former slaves, and all of them had the same thing to say, that they liked Mr. York. He wouldn't let anybody beat him or abuse them. Any overseer that struck a slave would at least get a severe reprimand, but usually he just got fired. He wouldn't allow them to hurt the slaves. And they produced for him. He made huge amounts of money. One year he did 4,500 bales of cotton. And that was enough to make him a millionaire several times over by today's standards. When secession came, he ran for a delegate to the secession convention from Concordia Parish. Nobody ran against him. So he was elected unanimously. He voted to secede. Most of them did. He then decided to raise his own regiment, and he wanted to create an entire Polish brigade. He went down to New Orleans. His mama was Polish, and he was fluent in that language. And he wasn't successful in recruiting as many as he wanted from the wars of New Orleans. But he did create a company, and then it was expanded with other units to form the 14th Louisiana. York foot the bill himself. He paid for the recruiting of the regiment and the equipping, and it became one of the better regiments in the Army of Northern Virginia. He could have been the commander, but he said, I don't have enough military background. I'll start out as a captain. And did, but shortly thereafter, the major resigned, and they elected York major. They took him up to Virginia by way of Grand Junction, Tennessee, and give you an idea of how rough this unit was. They had a riot, and 9 of the soldiers were killed and several civilians. The Colonel Stanislavski personally shot several of his own soldiers for indiscipline. Like I said, it was a pretty tough bunch. He fought in the Battle of Williamsburg during the Peninsula Campaign. And General Longstreet saw him and personally gave him a commendation. He was so impressed with his fearlessness and his good judgment. After that, he ended up transferred over to Stonewall Jackson's Corps. Ended up as acting regimental commander of the 14th Louisiana. And he was on that railroad cut. The fighting was almost hand to hand. The Union and Confederate flags almost touched there at the railroad embankment, and the rebels ran out of ammunition. But the railroad was partially constructed, so they had rocks there, and some of them were huge, size of softballs. And that's what York's men used to repulse the last Yankee attack. Several Northerners were killed by rocks, and several others were severely bruised. So York was a tough warrior. He got shot in the neck just below the spine during that battle, and for a time it was feared he would be paralyzed. But he got better. They sent him back to Louisiana to recover. He tried to resume his plantation activities, but he lost 2,000 bales of cotton. He lost roughly the equivalent of $60 million in today's money. And then for part of 1863, he helped Richard Taylor train troops for the Trans-Mississippi Department. And that's where he got in trouble. He and Mr. Hoover were riding their horses one day, and they were captured by Union patrol, and they ordered them to dismount, and Hoover dismounted immediately. Well, York was wounded, and he he made a show of being very slow. I can't move very fast because of my wound. And he did it at glacial speed. Well, the Yankees were a little impatient, but they sat there and rolled their eyes and waited for him to get off his horse. And as soon as his foot hit the ground, it's like one of those Mexican jumping beans. He popped right back up in the saddle, applied the spurs, and took off. And they took the Yankees by surprise. They shot at him, but they missed, so he got away. He rejoined the Army of Northern Virginia right after Gettysburg, and like I say, commanded the 14th Louisiana. He was with them at the Wilderness, where they were surrounded by the Yankees, and one of his aides said, "Colonel, we are surrounded." And York said, "Well, that's good, because any way we shoot, we can hit a Yankee." And he led them in a breakout, and they returned to Confederate lines. They escaped. Meanwhile, Louisiana kind of had its own way of doing things. They had a 1st and 2nd Louisiana Brigade, but they suffered so many casualties, they consolidated them. Well, the 1st and 2nd Louisiana Brigade headquarters were dissolved, but they didn't dissolve themselves. They continued to function as part of the chain of command, even though they had officially ceased to exist. And Zebulon York took command of the 2nd Louisiana Brigade. Now, General Stafford commanded the first one. He was killed at Spotsylvania. General Hayes commanded the Consolidated Brigade, and he was seriously wounded as well at the Wilderness. And Zebulon York assumed command of the brigade. And they sent him to the Shenandoah Valley with Juba Early. And York distinguished himself again. He pretty much made a habit of that. At Monacan, he led the assault, which on July the 19th, which broke the Union lines. And they pursued them to the suburbs of Washington, D.C. He later took part in the Shenandoah Valley campaign up until the Third Battle of the Wilderness, and a Union attack was coming. It needed to be stopped. General Early told York to stop it. He had only 650 men left in the Louisiana Brigade by that point. So he understood psychology. It's if you stand still and await a charge, it's not as good as if you run out and meet it. So he led a charge, and he met the Yankees halfway, and they fought in the field, and the Confederates prevailed, at least in that part of the battle. But meanwhile, York's arm was almost ripped off by Union shrapnel. It was probably fired, ironically enough, by the 1st Maine Battery. We're not sure of that, but he was from Maine, and they pretty much crippled him. They took him back to the hospital and amputated what was left of his arm. And he was lying there, and then the Confederate Army, of course, was defeated and was streaming back. And he had a friend in the town of Winchester who came to see him in the hospital and said, "Come to my house. We'll put you up there, and the Yankees won't bother you until you've recovered from your wounds enough to survive the prisoner of war camps." And York said, "I'm not going to do that. They will never take me alive." And he got on a horse. And this was about an hour after they cut his arm off, and said words to the effect of, "Tell the Yankees they can keep the arm." And he rode a horse more than 20 miles back to Fisher Hill, where there was an ambulance, and they put him in the ambulance, carried him to Stoughton, and eventually to Richmond. So he lost his arm and rode over 20 miles on horseback an hour after that. this is the kind of guy who can go bear hunting with a switch. He was tough. And they gave him a rear area assignment after that. He had to get reserves from North Carolina, and the way he recruited them, he'd go to prisoner of war camps. Lincoln had recruited during the war 489,920 foreign mercenaries from 15 different countries. And Zebulon York went to the prisoners, and he knew how to talk to them. He said, some of them were Polish, and apparently spoke German as well, and told them, you can join me, or you can stay here and starve. And they preferred to, the Yankee soldiers joined the Confederate Army. And he raised a brigade of about 1,500 men out of nothing. And, after Richmond fell, General Kilpatrick, the Union cavalry commander, was in the area. He had 5,100 men. York was assigned the task of keeping Jefferson Davis's escape route open on the Yadkin River. It was only one bridge, and he was outnumbered 3-1. But fortunately for the Confederacy, Kilpatrick didn't know that Davis was in the area. He broke his forces into 3 different segments. So York was facing even odds there on the Yadkin. And he knew how to get the most out of a very mixed team. He defeated the Union forces in an 8-hour battle, kept the escape route open for Davis. And President Davis told him, "I will never forget you for this. What you did today will be remembered." Maybe it was, but they never saw each other after that. Davis got away, but he was eventually captured down in Georgia. When the Confederate Army surrendered, York did too. He went back home. Everything he had was gone. They took his house. But he was a good lawyer. He sued him, and eventually won his main plantation home back. But it was stripped. I mean, he had a law library which was worth $5,000 in 1865 money. That's a little over about $110,000 today. It's gone. The furniture was gone. They even took the curtain rods. So he had to build up from nothing, and he did. He never was rich as he was before the war, but he owned the York House, which is a major resort hotel. He owned several rental properties in Natchez. He built a steamship company out of nothing. Had 5 or 6 steamships, depending on the source. But he still was a very nice guy. They had a flood there in 1873. A lot of people in Louisiana were destitute. He took food on his boats to these people, and didn't charge them anything for the transport or the food. He gave it away free, and probably saved a lot of lives. Certainly mitigated a lot of suffering. York was a good fellow. He finally got married 1885 to a girl he had met as a student in Wilmington, North Carolina, about 1862. So they didn't have any children. He was moderately wealthy by the time he died in 1900. And he's buried there at the old city cemetery in Natchez, just behind the cemetery headquarters. Anyway, like I say, I admired Zebulon York. He was a good brigade commander. And the Confederacy had quite a few of those. Of course, they had to. There weren't enough regular Army officers to go around. But I found a great quote by Napoleon. I wish I'd had it when I wrote my book on Nathan Bedford Forrest. Napoleon said, "In war, as in prostitution, sometimes the amateur outperforms the professional. And York did that to a large degree. The senior Louisiana general was G.T. Beauregard. His first name was Pierre, but he dropped it. He was a very, very interesting character. I wish he had been able to get along with President Davis. That may have actually affected the outcome of the war. And Davis was prickly, and Beauregard had a jealous nature, and men like to be corrected. And Beauregard, of course, performed brilliantly at the First Battle of Manassas. Back to his superior officer, Joseph E. Johnston, at the end of the Battle of Manassas. Davis wanted to pursue all the way to Washington. Johnston didn't want to, and Beauregard sided with Johnston. Davis didn't pursue, and he later said that was the worst mistake he made in the war. I kind of think Beauregard was demonstrating a misplaced sense of loyalty there. I think he wasn't as sure as Johnston that they shouldn't pursue, but he backed his superior. And of course, we never did take Washington. It's the best chance we ever had. Beauregard, what Beauregard didn't understand, now Beauregard was a brilliant military engineer, but he didn't really understand logistics. He sent Jefferson Davis a couple of proposals for capturing D.C. and invading the North, which couldn't be done because you couldn't supply it. If you can't supply it, you can't do it. And this led to him writing a couple of snippish letters. Davis ignored the first one and not the second. Wasn't in Davis's nature. And they got into a feud that lasted the rest of Davis's life. And in the end, Davis transferred Beauregard to the Western Front to get rid of him. Made him second command to Albert Sidney Johnston. And I think Beauregard misfired at Shiloh because Johnston left it up to him to dictate the Confederate depositions, how we're going to place our troops. And they had 3 corps, and Beauregard placed them in 3 lines, which essentially, this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but each corps commander had a 3-mile-long front to command. Wouldn't it have been better to, with green troops especially, to put each corps side by side so each major commander had 1 mile to supervise without radios, walkie-talkies, or much in the way of communication? That would have worked out a lot better. Nobody ever got to ask Johnston why he did it that way, why he accepted Beauregard's depositions. But because, as you know, Johnston was killed the next day. Nobody ever had a chance to ask him. But Beauregard took over command of the army after Johnston was killed. And at the very end, he had Grant pushed back to his last defensive position. But Grant had brought up 54 cannons. So it's problematic whether the Confederate attack on that position would have succeeded or not. We don't know. But that's the point. We should. That was the only chance he had to finish off Grant's army. Grant was reinforced that night by Buell's army, and Beauregard was forced off the field the next day. Strangely enough, Braxton Bragg, the second in command of that army, wanted to attack. And I don't get to say this very often, but Bragg was right, I think. if that's the only chance you've got, you got to take it. And that was Bragg's attitude. Beauregard then retreated, and his retreat to Corinth was brilliant. One of the underappreciated achievements of the war. He was outnumbered 3-1. It took him a month to go 40 miles. And when he decided to evacuate it, the Yankees had no idea what he was doing. They were preparing for a major battle because they heard the Confederate trains coming in. Troops were cheering the arrival of the new Confederate troops. The only thing about it was there were no new Confederate troops. The men who were cheering were there on orders. They wanted the Yankees to hear the cheers. They heard the trains coming in. They assumed it was reinforcements. Trains were empty. And they'd back them out and do it again. So the Yankees thought Beauregard had brought in thousands and thousands of new troops, and they were going to have one heck of a battle. So they advanced very timidly. Beauregard escaped with his entire command. All he lost was a little forage for the horses. Like I say, brilliant retreat. And this enabled Bragg later to go around by Chattanooga and invade Kentucky. Beauregard, meanwhile, developed a serious sore throat, so he decided to take some time off and left the Army with Bragg as temporary commander. He told General Cooper, the Adjutant General of the Confederacy, via telegram that he was going to do this. But he didn't bother to tell Jefferson Davis, who went ballistic when he found out his Army commander wasn't with the Army. So he fired Beauregard. And he only restored him to a command later because of political pressure. And it was a real backwater theater by that point, Charleston, South Carolina. But Beauregard's defense of Charleston was brilliant. He used submarines, mines, booby traps. The Yankees didn't take Charleston until almost the end of the war, February 1865. Boy, he did a great job there. And he loved Charleston. He was a bit of an aristocrat, and he knew how to talk to him. He was charming, especially with the ladies. He fooled around a little bit, but he was discreet about it and knew how to talk to the Charleston aristocrats and got cooperation and held the city. Like I say, till Sherman came. They had to take it the other way. They couldn't take it by frontal assault. They tried at Battery Wagner, Fort Wagner, and other places. Didn't get much but long casualty lists. Then they sent Beauregard up to Virginia, where he again performed brilliantly in Petersburg. He isolated, he was outnumbered 3-1, isolated a whole Union Army in the Bermuda Hundred Peninsula. And it stayed virtually the end of the war. He controlled the neck of the bottle, and they couldn't take it. And then Grant stole a march on Lee, and they attacked Petersburg, and he won the first and second battles of Petersburg. And again, he was outnumbered 2 and 3-1. That may have been his best performance. But I think if, Davis was criticized for firing Joseph E. Johnston in Atlanta and replacing him with John Bell Hood. And I agree that replacing him with John Bell Hood was a disaster. I don't think replacing Joseph E. Johnston was a bad move at all. Johnston retreated. He'd already abandoned the best defensive positions in Georgia. And sometimes he wouldn't even communicate with Jefferson Davis, wouldn't answer his telegrams. And he would not guarantee that he would fight before Atlanta. And, Davis was afraid he'd abandon Atlanta without a fight. And I think justifiably so. So Davis sacked him. If he'd replaced him with Beauregard, I think Beauregard would have held it to the election. And then I think Abraham Lincoln would have lost the election. Abraham Lincoln certainly thought so. He said so. And had that happened, they'd have a Democratic Party, which was much more amenable to a negotiated peace and letting the South go. But that's one of history's might have beens. I don't know. What do you think of that, Moose?
It is interesting to look at some of our history and be like, man, what would have happened if we did things just a bit differently, or if we didn't let personal feelings get in the way of something. And again, we have hindsight of 2020. There's a lot of things that we can say, well, that didn't work out too well. But I was always fascinated about Forrest and what we could have done with him that could have changed the war. I actually got that question in my mind because of reading your book, actually.
Well, Sherman was certainly afraid of it. He actually met Forrest one time where they could sit down and talk. He met him at Fallen Timbers, but that was during the war, and they came within a few feet of each other. And Sherman said, had Forrest not emptied his revolvers breaking through our line, my career would have ended then and there. He would have, Forrest would have cheerfully shot him. But they ran into each other on a steamboat and sat down and talked. And Sherman was supplying 135,000 men with wagons and one rail line. And if you lost that rail line, the wagons weren't enough to supply the troops. The drive on Atlanta would have been finished. And Forrest wanted to attack the rail line, but Davis wanted them to defend northern Mississippi, which was important. It was a breadbasket. And Sherman said, when I was driving on Atlanta, I used to have nightmares that you would attack my railroad. And Forrest said, had I been given my head, your nightmares would have come true. Forrest was better at destroying railroads than anybody else. The Yankees would rip up the rails and heat them in the middle, and some of the Wheeler would do that. Some of the Confederates would. They'd get them soft in the middle and wrap them around trees. They called it Sherman's neckties. Well, that might make a good photograph for Harper's Weekly, but it's inefficient. It takes time and effort. You've got to rip out the rails and heat them and tie them around the tree, which is not an easy thing to do with a hot piece of railroad. What Forrest would do, he would take a small amount of wood and put it on the track. He wouldn't rip it up. He'd set the wood on fire, let it burn, and it would melt the rails a little bit, warp them rather than melt. And it'd just be off 2 or 3 inches. And that may not sound like much, but you can't run a railroad train if the gauge has been warped by 3 inches. And you do that up and down the tracks a few times, that railroad's useless. He did that up in West Tennessee in 1862. They didn't run trains there till a year after the war. And you get a railroad warp like that, the Yankees come in. The first thing they got to do is remove their own useless rails. And to add insult to injury, the wood that Forrest used Toward the tracks was Union cordwood that they'd cut for their locomotives. They had gone to a lot of trouble, expense, and effort to supply Forrest with wood he used to destroy their railroads. So there was a lot of irony there. Basically, Forrest was saying in your face. And anyway, another senior Union Confederate general from Louisiana was, and Louisiana doesn't claim him. I'm sure I'll get some feedback on this one, was Braxton Bragg. He was from North Carolina. He ended up in Louisiana. He had some problems, and mama issues, I think. He always respected and admired his father, but he never said anything about his mother. Apparently, well, we know that she murdered a black man. He walked by and they had words. And the next day he came by and she walked out and shot him, killed him. Got arrested and put in jail. And apparently Braxton Bragg he was just a child. He had to go to jail with his mother. They didn't have the social service infrastructure we have today. She got off because juries in those days tended to let women go for things like that. But I think it kind of affected him. And he went to West Point. He didn't make any lasting friends. He was a very irascible person, hard to get to know, hard to get to like, and fractious and argumentative. His closest friend at West Point was William T. Sherman. They corresponded for years after the war, but he got court-martialed because he got into it with Winfield Scott, the General-in-Chief of the Army. He wrote 9 articles using a pen name criticizing General Scott's conduct as General-in-Chief. And I think Scott may have found out about it because Bragg had managed to get called in front of Congress. And Scott told him, don't go, do not testify. Well, Bragg ignored it. He went and testified anyway, and Scott nailed him, court-martialed him. But strangely enough, Bragg only got a slap on the wrist. He lost half a month's pay for 2 months. But later it played a role in his career in Mexico. He was commander of a regular Army artillery battery at Monterrey de la Tenera. And then, that was Zachary Taylor's army in northern Mexico. The main attack was going to be led by Scott himself through Veracruz in central Mexico, straight to Mexico City. And he pulled all the regular Army units out of General Taylor's command, except for Braxton Bragg's battery. He left it there. And Santa Anna learned what the American plans were by reading American newspapers. He knew that Taylor was isolated with 4,000 men in the Veracruz area, Saltillo, and the main American thrust was going to come through central Mexico, but it was going to be a while. And so he had a chance to fall on Taylor. Santa Anna had 20,000 men. General Taylor had 4,000. And this was the Battle of Veracruz. And Taylor won it, thanks largely to Jefferson Davis, commander of the 1st Mississippi Rifle Regiment at that time. And Colonel Davis was supported by the artillery battery of Braxton Bragg. And it permanently ingratiated Bragg with Davis. Matter of fact, one author said the Confederacy lost the war at the Battle of Veracruz. Buena Vista, because that's where Bragg saved Davis's regiment. Davis ran up and down the line yelling, "Double shot your cannon, Mr. Bragg." Had fire canistered the Mexican ranks, and they defeated Santa Anna. And Bragg was a bona fide war hero. And that's where he made contact with Louisiana. He went there, met the lady who became his wife. She was a beauty, apparently, by all accounts. And they ended up having 6 children. He got a sugar plantation out of the deal, resigned his commission, and had at one time 105 slaves, made a lot of money. He was very good at managing plantations. Even though he had a pretty steep mortgage, he would have been perfectly content to have stayed there and spent the rest of his life running the plantation. But the war intervened, and this is why I put Bragg in the category of Louisiana generals. When Louisiana seceded, the governor named Braxton Bragg commander-in-chief of the Army of the Republic of Louisiana. Of course, the Republic of Louisiana only lasted about 2 weeks. It seceded on, January 26, 1861. The Confederacy was established on February 9th, so the Army ceased to exist. Of course, Bragg and Beauregard had a little bit of friction there. Beauregard wanted to command the Army. He wanted to be commander of the Army of the Republic of Louisiana, and they gave it to Bragg. Well, Bragg offers him a colonelcy, which is a big deal. But Beauregard, always the showman, he couldn't help but be Beauregard. He dramatically enlisted in the Orleans Guards as a private. And I don't think he ever stood inspection by a second lieutenant, but that's where they parted company. But they never really had a brow like Davis and Beauregard did. Beauregard, of course, was a failure. Nobody doubts that. But he wasn't as entirely useless as a lot of the authors say. I'm going to take up for Bragg a little bit because he commanded down there in Pensacola, which essentially the Army of Pensacola became a training command. And some of the best regiments in the Confederate Army came out of Pensacola. He was a great training officer. And I think he was misused in the Civil War. I think, like I say, with perfect hindsight, if Davis had named Bragg chief training officer of the Confederacy, it would have done us a great deal of good in 2 respects. We would have had much better trained regiments because Bragg was good at that. And secondly, we would not have had Braxton Bragg commanding the Army of Tennessee, which would have been a lot better. I think Davis's replacement of Beauregard was a terrible mistake. Anyway, and certainly replacing with Bragg was really a bad mistake. Also, one thing that most people don't know about Braxton Bragg is he had migraines. He had to go to bed sometimes. He couldn't see. They were pretty bad. So his health was an issue. And I think sometimes he should have reported himself ill. Because he always followed the pattern of attacking, winning a victory, and then stopping and not following up. Stone River, or the Second Battle of Murfreesboro was a great example of that. Also, Chickamauga, to an extent, Perryville. Anyway, that was one of your Louisiana generals that didn't do so good. Do we need to take a break? Or,
Yeah, we're going to take a quick Pop-Tart break, and we'll be right back with just a couple more history talks. I've had a great time tonight. Again, I'm going to ask everybody to please share this out. We have a great crowd here tonight, so share this out. Let's get a couple more people involved tonight. And as always, please remember, tonight's Pop-Tart break is sponsored by the Kennedy Twins' newest book, Jefferson Davis, High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government. Jefferson Davis' High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government is about how Jefferson Davis was a leader of the high road to emancipation. He looked to the day which slaves would be prepared to live and participate in society. He did more, though, than advocate for this high road to emancipation. He practiced his beliefs in the ultimate emancipation of Southern slaves. And many of his former slaves left for prosperity, and their testimony about their former master who prepared them to be self-sustaining members of society. You can get the Kennedy Twins' most recent book, Jefferson Davis' High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government, at www.kennedytwins.com and most online bookstores, including www.scv.org and www.visitbeauvoir.org, both listed in their respected gift shop sections of their website. We want to thank the Kennedy Twins' most recent book, Jefferson Davis' High Road to Emancipation Constitutional Government, for sponsoring tonight's Pop-Tart break, and we shall return after this break.
When my mother was in college, she danced with Confederate veterans. To me, it wasn't that far away. My father knew this. My mother knew this. Almost 50 years ago, I joined the Sons of Confederate Veterans. In those days, we weren't concerned about saving monuments or any of those things. That wasn't necessary. In fact, none of us had any remote idea that it would ever come up. We can't just sit there and react. We have to be proactive. Or, as Robert E. Lee said, the best way to disrupt your enemy's plans is to strike first. Everyone should do all in his power to collect and disseminate the truth, in the hope that it may find a place in history and descend to posterity. History is not the relation of campaigns and battles and generals or other individuals, but that which shows the principles for which the South contended and which justified her struggle for those principles. If you're looking for some place to be where you think you're going to accomplish something to save our history, go to the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm Thomas Lee Jesse. I'm a descendant of Private Daughtery Gilmer, a Confederate veteran.
Always love that commercial. And again, we want to thank the Kennedy Twins' most recent book, Jefferson Davis, High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government, for sponsoring tonight's Pop-Tart break. And now, let's get back into some history.
I got a spoiler alert for you. Ron Kennedy is writing a great book on Reconstruction. And he's been kind enough to let me read several chapters. And it's going to be just a degree short of The South Was Right. It's that good. It is awesome. Ron's going to be speaking in Lake Charles tomorrow night to the SCV camp there. But look for that book probably next year. I think it's a future classic. I can't wait. Yeah. I don't use the term modern classic. Classic is something that has endured the test of time, 75 years. Therefore, a modern classic, the term is kind of like the term partially pregnant. It simply has no meaning. But a future classic, it may be. And like I say, I've been really excited. My wife's doing the proofreading. She's done that for number of major publishers, and it's a great book. I feel like a kid in the candy store reading that, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, You want to talk a little bit about Alfred Mouton? You might enjoy hearing about him. Are you aware of him? He was.
No, sir. I haven't heard that name a lot, I will have to say, in my personal studies.
He was Brigadier General down in Louisiana. He was the son of a governor and didn't speak English so he was a teenager. And they sent him to West Point, a major engineering school in the Western Hemisphere. And he could barely speak English, and he nevertheless managed to complete the program. He did in the bottom half of the class, but still, that's a remarkable achievement. Graduated. Meanwhile, his mother died when he was a child. He was a member of a blended family. Families like that often have problems. But I think his stepmother was his favorite person in the world. He loved her till the day he died. He had to resign his commission after a few months because his father was seriously ill. He took over the management of the plantation. His father was a former governor of Louisiana and a sitting U.S. senator, so obviously he had no problem getting into West Point. But a lot of people were surprised that he survived it because such a language difference. Anyway, he was very successful as a plantation owner, married a beautiful woman, had 4 children, I believe it was. But they had problems in South Louisiana at that time. Most people don't understand that a lot of the Old South was cattle country. Many people think that, the Western frontier, that's where the cattle culture evolved. They've seen too many John Wayne movies. I could take you to the colonial records of South Carolina and show you rustling and brandings, and roundups, and cattle drives, and also gunfights and vigilantes, everything from the Old West except the Spanish saddle horn. They didn't have that. But the cattle culture did not originate in the West. It moved west. Southwest Louisiana, for example, was still cattle country until the 1880s when Seaman A. Knapp introduced mechanized rice production to the region. That's what I wrote my dissertation about. You may want to get a copy, or you may want to wait for the movie. Not really. It's not very exciting, but still, it shows how it evolved. And in the 1850s, the area around Vermilionville, which we now call Lafayette, was cattle country. And they had rustlers, and they had a major outlaw gang that had experienced some success. And they had 100 members at one point. And they were stealing herds of cattle and planning to raid Vermilionville, loot the town, maybe burn it, but certainly steal everything in sight. Well, Alfred Mouton had managed to secure an appointment as Brigadier General in the state militia. And the governor told him, don't take action against this group. It'd be illegal, vigilante action. Mouton ignored him. They surrounded the vigilante camp with Mouton in command with 500 men. And this was I think it was 1857. And the outlaws fired on him, but fortunately for the outlaws, it didn't hit anybody. If they killed somebody, there's no telling what would have occurred. Anyway, the outlaws soon realized how many men they had against them. So they surrendered. Mouton captured them all, selected the leaders, and beat them with whips, and then took them to the edge of the Acadia country, turned them loose with instructions, never come back, and they never did. The others they threatened and said, if you commit any other acts, we will hang you. And in those days they would. They were kind of afraid of Mouton and his people. The outlaws had been defended by crooked lawyers. Mouton and his people apprehended the crooked lawyers and had counseling sessions with them, and they were admonished never to represent this type of client again. And apparently they never did. Peace was established in the Vermilion area. And he was a hero at that point. He ran for the police jury. Everybody else withdrew. He was elected. That's the parish governing body. He was elected. The very first meeting, they elected him president of the police jury. Highly respected man in his community. When the war came, he recruited his own regiment, and he fought at Shiloh. Most people think there was one battle of Shiloh. There were really two. Grant had his troops aboard transports, and they sent gunboats to land at Pittsburgh Landing, which is another word for the name of the Battle of Shiloh. As a matter of fact, Mouton headquartered in Shiloh Church, and they had an artillery battle. The Yankees lost 70 men. Mouton lost 9 killed. I think it was 22 wounded. But the Yankees determined they could not land at Pittsburgh Landing because Mouton would defeat them. So they withdrew. So the South won the first battle of Shiloh. They moved on up to Crump's Landing, 5 miles north of Pittsburgh Landing. That's where they landed their troops. Grant brought a total of 18,000 men against Mouton's single regiment. And Mouton correctly assumed that, I can't beat these guys. So he retreated without a battle. And that's how the Yankees took the Pittsburgh Landing area and the Shiloh area. And that's where they were on April 6th when the Battle of Shiloh began, the big battle. Mouton fought there, distinguished himself, got seriously wounded. They sent him back to New Orleans. And he was there when the city fell, but he managed to get away. Mouton was promoted to brigadier general because of his success in the Shiloh area. But he had to work under Richard Taylor. One day we'll have to have a show about my book, Confederate Patent, Richard Taylor and the Red River Campaign. I'll go into details about Taylor's personality. That's that book. You're supposed to be getting a copy of it.
Can't wait.
I'll remind Paul Graham to be sure to send you one. It should be shortly. It was just released. It was a lot of fun to do. But anyway, Mouton had to work for Taylor, and Mouton was one of those people, it turns out, who was a great subordinate commander, but when they gave him an independent command there in the Bayou Fourche campaign, South Louisiana, he performed poorly. And Taylor had some pretty scathing things to say about him. And that's just why Mouton never made major general. They gave him command of a division, but he was never recommended for his, what we would call today a second star. But Mouton was a great man to have as a subordinate. And Taylor really admired him as long as he wasn't an independent command. Of course, they fought at Mansfield, and Mouton launched one of the most magnificent charges in the Civil War. Taylor had, the Yankees had 32,000 men lavishly supplied and backed by a fleet of gunboats. Taylor had 8,800 men, 2 infantry divisions under Texas General Walker and Alfred Mouton. Well, when the battle came at Mansfield, Taylor wanted Mouton to spearhead it because he had Louisiana troops. And fighting for Louisiana, he assumed that they would excel, and they did. Casualties were fierce, but they broke the Union line, and this led to one of the most incredible routes of the war. 800 Confederates, 32,000 Yankees. They chased those Yankees 200 miles all the way across the state, surrounded them twice, inflicted huge casualties on them, cut off the Union fleet. It had to shoot its way out, lost the largest gunboat in the Union Navy, inland Navy. It was a great campaign from the Confederate point of view. Unfortunately, one of the casualties was Alfred Mouton. He got too close to the front, and there are conflicting stories on what happened to him. One is that a Yankee who had surrendered saw the Confederate general, and he had dropped his rifle, reached down, picked it up, and shot the general through the heart. Another is, and this is one I tend to believe, the 48th Ohio was collapsing, fired its last organized volley, and General Mouton had gotten too close and was hit 5 times in the chest. Another story is that Mouton came across a group of 30 prisoners of war, and they saw who he was, and they grabbed their rifles, and 5 of them shot him. I don't believe that. I think one Union soldier losing his head is a believable story, but they had to know that if they shot that general, the Confederate guards would kill every one of them. And according to that story, they did. But the rumor persisted that Mouton had been murdered. And the Battle of Mansfield was fought with the cry, Mouton, much as the Battle of San Jacinto was fought with the cry, remember the Alamo. Mouton was a beloved commander despite being a strict disciplinarian. And to be honest, part of his gravitas was the fact he looked like a general. You know, Cajuns tend to be smaller people, and the average soldier in Civil War was a little over 5'7" tall and weighed 143 pounds. Mouton was about 6 feet tall, and he weighed 210 pounds and looked like a lion. He had this thick black beard. He looked like a general. And like I say, he was a great independent commander. I mean, a great subordinate commander. He was not a very good independent commander. One of the top generals, well, I should say top figures in the Confederacy was Henry Watkins Allen. He was from Missouri. Came to Mississippi, taught as a private tutor at age 17. That's when he left Missouri. When he came back 10 years later, he was the richest man in the state. He had a talent for making money. He owned his own plantation, had over 125 slaves. He had his own railroad, apparently a large interest in a bank. Highly successful man, very brilliant, wrote books, traveled Europe, married a beautiful woman, but she had health issues and died after 7 years of marriage, never had children. That may have been because of a duel he fought. He caught a bullet in the groin, and speculation that's why they had no children. But he was tough. He was very profane, and you know, kind of like Nathan Bedford Forrest. If he threatened to shoot you, you took it seriously. And he did that at Vicksburg. When the Union fleet came up there at the end of May 1862, the Confederacy had some heavy artillery that had not been mounted. what happened, General Lovell knew that New Orleans was about to fall, so he sent a few batteries of heavy artillery to Vicksburg, but they hadn't been mounted, and the Yankee fleet was firing on the Confederates. And the men were dodging. They weren't interested in mounting the artillery. And I can't tell you all the words that Allen used, but he pulled a couple of pistols and told his men that the Yankees may or may not kill you, but I certainly will if you don't mount these guns right now under fire. And they did. And of course, that was a factor in Farragut's being defeated. There was a lot more to that story than that, but it does show you Allen's mentality. He fought at Shiloh, did very well, commanding a regiment. They gave him a brigade. He led it at Baton Rouge and charged Nims Battery, which was said to be the best battery in the Yankee Army. Anyway, they shattered both his legs, and he never was able to walk without crutches again for the rest of his life. And he was in the hospital bed when he found out just before the election that he had been nominated for governor. He'd been served a couple of terms in the legislature. People knew him. Everybody respected him. They knew he was a courageous commander. And they elected him governor. He did not campaign, not one speech. And he became, I think, the greatest governor in Confederate history. As a matter of fact, Douglas Southall Freeman, who won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, said that had the Confederacy recognized his abilities earlier, it might have made a difference in the outcome of the war. That's how good he was. He was a live wire. He never let the fact that he was handicapped be a handicap. He previously was one of the richest men in the state. He set up a governor's mansion, which had 3 bedrooms, one for him, one for his staff officers, and one for visitors. And despite his wealth, he only allowed himself one luxury. He drank 1 cup of real coffee every morning. And as one newspaper said, he was so successful because he put the interest of the average Louisianian above the rich and powerful. He would have men, it didn't matter if they were black or white or Confederate or Jayhawker, which was a Union sympathizer. Now, if they were carrying a weapon and they were Jayhawkers, that was a good way to get yourself hung. But he treated everybody just alike and would sit there with the average person and discuss their needs and supply them. And what he did, he discovered, the Confederacy had a lot of debt, and Louisiana owned a lot of it. But the Trans-Mississippi Department had a lot of cotton. So Allen made a deal with Kirby Smith, the commander of the Trans-Mississippi, give us cotton and we will cancel your debt. And Kirby Smith thought that was a great idea. Now, you got to remember the price of cotton has increased during the war from 6 cents a pound to $1.09 a pound. So getting hundreds of bales of cotton was a big deal. And what he would do, he bought wagons and set up state-owned wagon trains and transported the cotton to Mexico, where they would put it on a ship under a French flag and just sail straight by the Union blockade. They weren't going to do anything to a ship flying a French or British flag. And took them to Europe, sold the cotton, and brought back everything that they possibly could: pens, medicine, ammunition, guns, clothes. He set up factories to manufacture woolen and cotton textiles. at least 4 medical facilities that would manufacture medicine. He even manufactured school books and gave them to the police juries of the parishes to sell to people if their children wanted to go to school. And if they couldn't afford the books, they got it free. They had food. If they sell it at low cost, and if somebody couldn't afford it, he got it free. The state was incredibly efficiently run. And nobody's been able to say that about the Louisiana government since Henry Watkins Allen left Louisiana. And I think Douglas Southall Freeman was right. Had the South realized how good this man was earlier, it could have made a difference. In fact, he fled at the end of the war. They put the Union had a bounty on his head because they knew what he had done. And he went to Mexico. And they had the first carpetbag election. No Confederate was allowed to vote. Most of the white people couldn't vote. The African Americans could. And there was no organized write-in campaign for Allen. He still finished second, which pretty incredible. He died in 1866. And there were a lot of kids in Louisiana named Allen after that. In fact, 20 odd years after his death, they brought his body back to New Orleans and buried it. And then, after the carpetbaggers had been flushed, they took it to Baton Rouge and buried it on the grounds of the old state house, the old capitol there in Baton Rouge. You can still see it. It's the only man so honored. The only other grave you'll find in the area is on the new state house, Huey P. Long. They put his grave there. It's an interesting story if you ever get into studying him. The Long faction figured one day they'd be ousted, so they put in Huey's grave on the Capitol lawn and covered it with 12 tons of cement. They'll never remove that grave, but depending on the governor, if a governor was pro-Long, they would put the spotlights on it at night. If the governor was anti-Long, there wouldn't be any lights at all. But it'll be there forever. Anyway, it was a look at Henry Watkins Allen. You got to admire him. He was incredibly efficient. There were several others. Go ahead.
Oh, no, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to go on another general, but you go ahead and say something. You were going to speak.
No, sir, nothing much, but we might have to bring you on for a part 2 of this topic. We have gone over time for tonight.
Oh, sorry about that.
That just means you get to come on another time.
Oh,
and that's okay by me because you make my life easy and I get to sit back and learn. And I always love your episodes, Dr. Mitcham.
Well, I appreciate it.
Sir, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I should just say I appreciate it. Thank you for your compliment.
Well, we appreciate you coming on again. It's hard sometimes to find a good historian these days in the world of history, and us here at SCV Chat has hit the jackpot. I would say we always have a good historian on, and they're always the cream of the crop, so to speak. You one of the best in today's modern era, Dr. Mitcham, and I want to thank you for coming on. We do have a couple questions. We got some time for them. We'll go into these real quick. David Pope asks if there is a Zebulon York biography.
No.
No.
Nope. I think history would benefit from one, but yeah, probably not.
Well, that just means we need a historian to step up and write it.
There you go.
It'd be fun researching it, I bet. I better not tip Dr. Mitcham, or I'll have him on here next year for a York biography.
No, I've got a list of books to write, and that's not one of them.
I think that's how you can tell a good historian, a person who has like 6 books, ideas at a time in their head. You just got to figure out when you're going to have the time to write them all.
Yeah, well, I'm doing one now that might surprise you.
Oh, well, I can't wait. As always, I love doing book reviews, especially on your book, because I heavily enjoy reading your books. Again, I compared, this was probably my favorite work of yours so far, was, of course, the Bust Hell Wide Open, of course. I enjoyed reading that one. I bought that, and I believe we brought you on right before the reinterment. And I remember reading that book the whole week before we brought you on, and I was like, wow. And then there's one more, and its name is slipping me. But you talked about it on the show, and it was a story about more so evolving around privates and the common Confederate story.
Voices from the Confederacy.
Voices of the Confederate. I loved that one to death, because I do agree with you. You said this when you came on. Sometimes, we have such great people in the war that served as generals. Sometimes you look past some of the privates that have these great stories, and the common man, the common soldier. And so I loved that book. That book, beautiful. Love it. It's in my bookshelf. Actually, it's by my nightstand, because I picked it up and started rereading it the other night.
Oh, well, very good. Somebody read it.
I've read it twice now, and this is the start of my 3rd time. Don't tell anybody. I love that book to death. But thank you, Dr. Mitcham, for coming on. Again, always a blast. Make sure you share this episode out, everybody. Let's get a lot of views. This is a great historical episode, a lot of information. Make sure to come back, take notes, just relax, play this on your way to work, whatever it takes. Just enjoy it. We were all historians, and we all love a good history talk. And make sure you email scvyouth@gmail.com for the upcoming episode of Look Around the Confederation this Thursday at 7 p.m. Make sure to get your news in, everybody. And without further ado, we will see y'all then. And remember, chat heads, no fumar in the elevator. Good night, everybody.